Hello, I am Gauri Devi. I'm a first year student in IT Roorkee pursuing my BTech in Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. Today, I will be presenting to write a C++ program to check if the user's input is a palindrome or not. The process of developing code majorly involves 5 steps. The first, understanding the problem statement. Second, writing the algorithm or pseudocode to outline the logic of the program. As a beginner coder, it is important to learn how to write algorithm or pseudocode as it helps you develop the aptitude to come up with the logic. Step 3 is converting the pseudocode into actual executable C++ code. Once we've done that, we need to test it for any bugs or errors. So that's step 4, testing. We will be inputting different number of inputs and different types of input to check for errors. There are broadly 3 types of errors. Syntax errors that mainly involves not following the C++ language rules while writing the code. Runtime errors that occurs during the runtime of the code and leaves the code to be non-executable, such as dividing by 0. And the third error is logical error that leads to undesirable outputs even though the code is executable. During the testing process, if we do encounter such bugs, it is step 5, that is debugging, that must be taken forward. So we will be debugging and removing the errors from the code. Now that we've understood the process of developing code, let's start with the first step, understanding the problem statement. Our problem statement is to check if the user's input is a palindrome or not. The word that stands out here is palindrome. Let's try to understand what palindrome is. What is a palindrome? Palindrome is a word, number, phrase, or any sequence of symbols that reads the same backwards as forwards. This means that if we have a sequence of symbols and we reverse it, it would read the same as it originally did. So that is a palindrome. Let's take up some examples to understand this better. The words like kayak, rotor, civic are palindromes. Let's take civic. It spells CIVIC forwards and CIVIC backwards as well. So it's a palindrome. Numbers. 80808 is the second example. This reads the same backwards as well. So it is a palindrome. Sequence of symbols. GHTHG forwards and backwards is also GHTHG. So it's a palindrome. Now we've understood that the problem statement mainly involves us checking whether the user's input, once reversed, would read the same as it originally did. Now that we've understood our problem statement, let's move on to writing algorithm or pseudocode. Algorithm or pseudocode mainly involves breaking down the problem into finite achievable steps that clearly define the task to be followed to solve it. So if we have a big problem, we are breaking it down to smaller tasks that are clearly defined how they will solve the smaller problems. There is a very small distinction between what an algorithm and pseudocode is. Algorithm and pseudocode both use English language. However, algorithm uses complete sentences that enables even non-programmers to understand the steps. Pseudocode, on the other hand, uses short phrases which is very similar to what the actual code is to outline the logic of the program. Today I will be writing an algorithm. The first step of the algorithm is start. It indicates where we're starting to solve the problem from. Step 2. Based on our problem statement, we realize that we need to take an input from the user. To do so, we need to allocate some memory space to hold the input. So, our step 2 is declare 2 variables, input underscore user, to store input and a copy variable original underscore input. We will understand the copy variable in the following steps. Now, input underscore user is the variable that is going to hold the input. Now that we have the memory space allocated to hold the input, our step 3 is to actually accept the value. So accept input value from user and copy it into original underscore input. Now that we have done that, I am writing an algorithm considering a numerical input from the user. So the following steps now involve reversing the number and storing it. So the steps to do so are: step 4, declaring variables digit and reverse. The variable digit's purpose is to hold every extracted digit from input underscore user variable. Reverse, as the name suggests, will hold the reversed number. Step 5 is repeat the following steps until input underscore user is not equal to 0. So this is the main part of the program where the reversing of number takes place. So we are repeating certain sub-steps as long as the condition input underscore user not equal to 0 is true. The sub-steps are: store remainder after dividing input underscore user by 10 in digit. The process of dividing input underscore user by 10 leaves the remainder, which is essentially the last digit in the number itself. So this is the digit we are extracting and storing in variable digit. Substep 2 is to store the result of reverse multiplied by 10 and added with the value stored in digit, again in reverse. What we're doing here is modifying the reverse in every iteration, in every repetition of these sub-steps by multiplying by 10 to accommodate accumulating the extra extracted digit. So step 5.3 is to modify the value of input underscore user into input underscore user divided by 10. What it does here is it eliminates the previously extracted digit, enabling us to extract a new digit in the next repetition of steps. This continues as long as input underscore user does not store the value 0. Once it does that, the repetition of these steps stops and we next move on to step 6. After the step 5, we now have a reversed number in variable reverse. So now we can compare the value in reverse and original underscore input. If it is equal, and if the answer to the question reverse and original input are equal is yes, we will display it as a palindrome. If not, we will display it is not a palindrome. So now we have tackled the problem statement. We can end the logic. So the last step of an algorithm is always stop or end. Let's take up an example to understand the algorithm better. I have taken the example of the user input 4664. So we have accepted the value and stored it in the variable input underscore user and also copied it into original underscore input. The variables digit and reverse are also initialized. So we can move on to step 5, which was repeating 3 sub-steps to reverse the number and store in reverse. Repetition also means iteration or looping. So the leftmost column tells us how many times the 3 substeps have been iterated. So originally the digit variable stores 0, reverse variable stores 0, and input user stores 4664. Now input underscore user does not equal to 0. So we can start repeating 3 substeps. So first we divide 4664 by 10 and store the remainder, which is 4, in the variable digit. So the value of digit is updated from 0 to 4. Now if you notice, this is the last digit in the number here. So it has been extracted and stored in digit. Next, we update the value of reverse. So reverse into 10 plus 4. So this stores the last digit that was in the number as the first digit in the number reverse. Now we update and modify input underscore user by dividing with 10. Now this eliminates the last extracted digit and stores 466. 466 is not equal to 0, so we can repeat the steps again. Upon doing so, we extract the next digit from the number, which is 6. Then we modify the previously held value of reverse from 4 to 46 by this step. So essentially multiplying by 10 accommodates for adding the newly extracted digit. Then we modify input user by dividing by 10. Again, 46 is not equal to 0, so we can repeat the steps again. Upon doing so, we extract this next 6. Then we add this into reverse by multiplying with 10 and adding the digit 6. Now we modify input underscore user by 10. So this eliminates this digit 6 and stores 4 in the previously held value 46 instead of 46. Now 4 is not equal to 0, so we can repeat the steps again. 4 divided by 10 leaves the remainder 4. So digit holds the last value 4 in it. This 4 was essentially the first digit in the number 4664. Now, reverse is modified for the last time and now it holds 4664. This 4 was the first digit in the user input, which is now the last digit in the reversed number. So, variable reverse does hold the reversed number. Now, input user is modified again. 4 divided by 10 is 0. Now, input user holds the value 0. So, we cannot repeat the sub-steps again. And now we move on to step 6. Now we can compare. The value stored in original underscore input is 4664. In input underscore user is 0. And reverse is 4664. Upon checking whether reverse and original underscore input hold the same value, we can see that they do. And so the result is it is a palindrome. Now we have understood how the algorithm works. Let's move on to writing the code. I have written the code in Visual Studio Community, and so the compiler may vary with the IDE and compiler that you're using. So please accommodate for any changes that might involve. I have the snippet of the code here. As you can see in the first 2 lines, there are 2 statements in green after 2 forward slashes. These are called comments. Comments are non-executable parts of the code that enhance readability. Let's say I have to come back to this code after a couple of days. These comments will help me understand what each line of the code was set out to perform. I have given the title of the program here, program to check if the input from the user is a palindrome or not, and I have also defined what a palindrome is. Comments also function by increasing and helping us document the program as well. Moving on to the line 3, hash include in gray. Hash include is a preprocessor directive. It is basically an instructor that tells the compiler that certain header files need to be pre-processed prior to compilation. Header files are essentially files that store predefined functions which are imported into the program using hash include. So header files are these lines such as IOStream and algorithm that are shown in orange. So what they do is they hold predefined functions that require to be used in the program. To do so, we need to make these functions available to us prior to the compilation of the program. Hence, this is what hash include does. Now, moving on to using namespace std. Namespace contains built-in classes and declared functions. It so happens that certain functions are there in multiple namespaces. To the compiler, it might be a doubt as to which namespaces function it would have to use. To clear such doubts and confusions, we mentioned explicitly that it would have to use namespace std for whichever function required. So this is what the line in blue does. Now the header file IOStream is IO refers to input output. So it enables us to use input output services in our program. Algorithm contains certain functions that we will be using in our program later on. Now this is the main part of the program will be coming up. So this is the function number underscore palindrome where we will be reversing the number and checking for palindrome. Here, the syntax of writing function is return type space function name, and the brackets that indicate that it is a function. Our return type is bool, which can hold values true or false. The name of the function is number underscore palindrome. As the algorithm has mentioned, we are initializing two variables, number and original underscore number, which is initialized to 0. Cout is an object which stands for character output. So we will be utilizing this to display enter the number on the screen. So this increases interactivity with the user and tells them that they will now have to enter the number. Cin is another object called character input, which indicates that a stream of characters will now be taken into the system and stored in the variable number. These characters will be taken by the user, will be entered into the system by the user. A copy of the number is stored in original underscore number. Next, we are initializing and variables digit and reverse. Reverse is initialized to 0. Now we are moving on to step 5 in the algorithm, which was the repetition and looping of 3 sub-statements. C++ has 3 looping statements: for loop, while loop, and do while loop. We will be using while loop here. So the syntax of writing while loop is the while keyword, then in the brackets, we have a condition that needs to be satisfied before the while block gets executed. So this is the condition and this is the while block. As you can see, the while block contains 3 statements. Our condition is that the value stored in variable number should not be equal to 0. Exclamatory mark equal to is the not equal to operator. So if this condition is satisfied, we move into the while block and execute 3 statements. The first statement is dividing the number by 10 and storing its remainder in digit. This operator is called modulus operator, which indicates that the remainder is being stored in digit. Its operation is to take out the remainder upon division. Next, we have reverse variable, which is multiplied by 10 and added with the value stored in digit. This variable holds the reversed number. Next, we are modifying the variable number by dividing by 10 and eliminating the extracted digit that was extracted and stored in this statement. Now, once this is done, the flow of execution returns to this condition to check if number is not equal to 0. If not, it again continues into the while block. This cycle continues as long as the condition is satisfied. Once the condition becomes false, the flow of execution comes out of the while block and comes out of these curly braces. Next, we have an if and else conditional statement block. Here, conditional statement basically checks for true or false condition and executes certain blocks of statements depending on whether the condition was true or false. The syntax here is writing if keyword and then in the brackets the condition to be checked. If the condition is true, the statements in the if block are executed, but if the condition is false, the statements in the else block are executed. Here our condition is checking whether the original underscore number holds the same value as what variable reverse holds. So here we are checking for palindrome. If this condition is true, return true is executed and this function returns the value true. This indicates that number is a palindrome. If this condition is false, it will return false. And this indicates that it is not a palindrome. Now, let's move on to the next function where we are checking specifically if the word is a palindrome or not. This is quite similar to how we have done for numerical input. But here, our variable type is string. Previously, our variable type was int. It holds integer values. Here, string holds a set of characters that can be numbers and alphabets as well. So our variable is word, and original underscore word. Again, we have the common statement of enter the string and a cin statement to accept the string, and it is stored in the variable word. A copy of the input is stored in original underscore word as well. Here, we use a function called reverse that is present in the algorithm header file. What it does is, it reverses the string stored in word from the beginning to the end and stores it back in variable word itself. So this is what reverse does. Next, we have a conditional statement again, where we are checking if the string stored in original underscore word is equal to the string stored in word variable. If true, it executes this statement, return true, and the function string underscore palindrome returns true. Else, it will execute return false. So here, it indicates that string is a palindrome. Here, it indicates the string is not a palindrome. Moving to the int main function. So, the flow of execution in the C++ code always begins with the main function. However, if we are calling certain functions within the main functions, they will have to be declared and defined prior to the int main functions. This is why we began with writing these two functions before int main. In the int main function block, we have a cout statement stating that the program to check if input is a palindrome or not. Slash in here is an escape sequence that indicates that the cursor will have to move to the next line after the sequence of characters has been printed. Then endl also does the same thing. I have used slash n and endl to show you variations of how we can perform the same action differently. Next, we have another statement defining what a palindrome is. So this gives the user an idea what the program will be and what palindrome actually means. Next, I have increased the interactivity with the user by giving them a choice. So to store the choice, I have another variable int choice. I have a statement that displays enter 1 to input a number or 2 to input string. So basically, I'm telling them that I will be inputting a value that is a number if they input 1, and I will be inputting a string if they enter 2. So I expect them to enter 1 or 2. However, if they do enter some other values, I have to accommodate for that as well. So C in choice. Next, we have an if-else if block which has multiple statement blocks depending on whether the condition is true or false. So the condition that we are checking in the if block is whether choice has the value 1. If it does, we enter this block and execute these statements. Here we have another if-else condition block where we are calling the function number underscore palindrome. Once this is executed, once the statement is executed, the control and execution flow comes back to this function and this block is executed. Here, it will return a value true or false. Depending on that, here it will check if the returned value was true, then it will execute it is a palindrome statement. Otherwise, it will come to the else block and execute cout it is not a palindrome. Now, if choice was not equal to 1, it moves on to the next else if statement and checks if choice holds the value true, 2. If it does, it moves into this block of statements and executes this if else conditional block. Here we have string underscore palindrome being called. This function is then executed and here it returns true or false. Next, if it does return true, then it displays it is a palindrome. If it returns false, then it displays the else block statement. It is not a palindrome. Now, if choice did not hold the value 1 or 2, it goes into the else block and executes invalid input. Now, let us check the execution of the program by testing it. So this is the program and this is the IDE interface where I have written the program in Visual Studio Community. Let's test the code. Let's give the input 1 and enter the number 88688. The result is it is a palindrome. So the code works well. Next, let's check for an input of a string. I'm entering 2. I will input the string horse. It is not a palindrome. True. So the code worked well again. Next, let's check what it does if I input 7. It displays invalid input. So this is how my code works. And we have tackled the problem statement and executed the program properly. Thank you.